And that's the thing that I think people are missing is they don't understand truly how good they have it. And if you looked at the opportunity that you had, you'd be more grateful to go out there and work harder. And if you truly don't like the environment that you're in, change it. Either change the people or change the people, meaning change those that are around you by being a better influence, by working with them, by talking with them, or change the people by leaving. Like go join another team, another company that is going to allow you to grow, that's going to allow you to take what you do to the next level. Because if you're not willing to do that on your own, stop complaining. It is solely up to you. You 100% have the ability to control your emotions, to control your environment so that you can have a better situation. Stop blaming other people and take action.
That is JP Dinnell this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. How's it going? Welcome back to another episode here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. My name is Ian and I am the host of this podcast. And each week I have the opportunity to sit down with someone who is chasing their dream. They are living the life that they want to live. They are building their business. They are on a weight loss journey. They are doing it for themselves. And this week, I am excited to bring you a guest that I have been working on for a little while. Before we get into the guest, right up front, I just want to ask for a quick favor. If you could leave a review on whatever app it is that you are listening to this podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. This week, my guest is JP Dinnell. And JP is a former Navy SEAL. He was part of a SEAL team that went through the Battle of Ramadi, and he worked very closely with Jocko Willink. And after JP's career in the military, when he was transitioning into civilian life, he had started a consulting company. And while he was working on this consulting company, he was trying to figure out his path. He was trying to find his way, and he was faced with a very tough decision to go and take a job where he would be paid a fairly significant amount of money at a time where he really needed the money, or he could go and work with Jocko once again. And now at the time, looking back, and even during this decision, it was a pretty easy decision for JP, and he went to work with Jocko and has never looked back and is still working with Jocko to this day, building the company Echelon Front. So we get into a bunch of different stories from JP's time in the military. We talk about what it's like to work with Jocko, both on the battlefield and now in a company. It's a very wide-ranging conversation, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it.
Awesome. Well, JP, I just want to say, I said it before we started recording, but I do want to say thank you again. This podcast has been a long time coming. We've been going back and forth trying to get this scheduled. And, you're a busy guy. I'm a busy guy. It's definitely something that it's taken a little bit of time to work out, but I'm really, really excited to sit down and have this conversation with you on the Do It For Yourself podcast this evening and share your story of how you are doing it for yourself.
Awesome, man. I look forward to it. I appreciate you asking me to be a guest on this podcast, and I'm looking forward to sharing my story with your followers.
And so, before we get into your story, and we're going to get into how this opportunity has come about, but the first thing that I have to ask you is you work very, very closely with Jocko. And for those
Mhm.
of the listeners who don't know, Jocko Willink was, a former Navy SEAL, and he posts a picture religiously every single day of his watch, waking up at 4:30 in the morning. He posts some of his hotel workouts, some of his home garage gym workouts, right? He's a very, very intense guy. And I just have to know for myself and for the listeners, because you work so closely with him, is what everyone sees on Instagram and on podcasts and everywhere else, is that what Jocko is like every day, no matter what?
Yeah, he's one of the most consistent, hardworking, disciplined individuals that I've ever met in my life. He, and what you're seeing is only a fraction of everything that he's actually doing.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, I bet. And it's one of those things where I kind of knew the answer, but just for reassurance, I had to know, if obviously what he's posting is the truth, but is that, how he is day in and day out. And I mean, I'm sure coming from the background that he was in, it's kind of ingrained in him at this point, and I'm sure that's why he gets up at 4:30 in the morning still, um, even though he is no longer
Well,
serving
no,
in the military.
that's just something he's always done. When I was in the teams, I wasn't waking up at 4:30 in the morning.
Okay. Okay. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
it's just that's who he has always been. Because he's always wanted to knock out his workout early or get to works early so he could get stuff done and then get his workout in with the group of guys at work. He's just always been an early riser because he knows that's what he needs to do to be able to accomplish the tasks that he wants to accomplish.
And before we get too deep down the rabbit hole with, Jocko and the military and the SEAL training and everything else, I want to step back a little bit and kind of talk about what JP was like as a kid, because you always wanted to be a SEAL. Even as a kid, you were making your own ghillie suits, you were hiding in the bushes. When other kids were out playing, football or some of these other things, you were playing Navy SEALs. You always wanted to be a SEAL. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's something that I've wanted, like you just said, to do ever since I was a little boy. My brother Corey and I played Navy SEALs every chance that we had. Every chance that we had to play Navy SEALs, we were doing that. When we go up to my grandparents' property, we would practice stalking from their driveway, the side of the road, all the way up to the house. They had some acreage in the foothills of Northern California, and it was very wooded all the way around them. So we were always building little forts and bases and like little hides that we could hide in and just observe and watch people, like we were doing surveillance and recon. It was just, man, it was just something we wanted to do. We'd go to garage sales on the weekends and buy all the old camouflage gear from the Vietnam vets, and we would talk to them about the military, and we'd read these these little field survival manuals and practice painting our faces and building these survival lean-tos and structures. And I mean, we're infatuated with it. My brother found a documentary on the SEAL teams one day. My mom recorded it, and we watched it constantly. So yeah, as a little boy, that's all I kind of really wanted to do. And then, started to grow up a little bit, and lost sight of that when I got into about the junior high school range.
Yeah. So, well, the one thing wanted to say before we got into that was that it actually got to a point where your parents wouldn't even drive past like the Army Navy stores or the stores in the area that would sell these types of, gear and things like that, because they knew that you guys weren't going to let them drive past it without saying like,
Yeah,
"Hey, can we
if
go
we
in there?"
were near a recruiting station or an Army Navy surplus, we would just get super upset if we didn't get to go in there and go look through the camouflage gear or the web belts, the canteen belts, the face paint. We were so infatuated with that.
And so, because of this infatuation, as you start to work your way through high school, why do you think it is that you lost sight of this dream that you had always had as a little boy?
That's a great question. I've never had anybody ask me that question. I think it's because the way society thinks people should be living their lives. Teachers are telling you, hey, you have to go to college when you graduate from high school. Your parents are saying, hey, if you don't get a good college education, you'll never get a good job. And I have a high school diploma and that's it. And I have the absolute best job in the world right now. I had the best job when I was in the SEAL teams. And when I got out of the SEAL teams, I was doing sales at a financial company, doing very well with that high school education, and got promoted to sales manager. Got promoted above other people that had degrees in business and sales and marketing because I just took the traits that I learned in the military and helped apply them to what I was doing. But yeah, I think the reason why I lost sight of that is because, people don't encourage kids anymore to look at the military or think about the military or trade schools, so that they can, come out with a skill set and a craft that can be applied.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, but there is this really big push right now to, go to college and get your college education. And it's crazy because I've
Man, that's
seen.
been there forever. That push has been there for, I mean, forever, and it's getting even more so now. And it's like, actually, we need more people with skill sets and crafts, like,
Mhm.
out in these different trades to be able to do these jobs. I mean, there's good paying jobs. You can go to a trade school and graduate from that trade school and be making 60, 70, $80,000 a year one.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
mean, that's pretty dang good money right away.
Yeah, and on the other, like on the flip side of it, I mean, I see so many job postings and so many things, on LinkedIn and this and that, and these companies are looking for 5 years experience, masters preferred, and all this stuff. It's like, who has that coming out of college? It's
Yeah,
like,
where are you supposed to get that experience?
yeah, there's all these jobs that want you to have 5 to 7 years of experience. For a kid coming out of college, how are you going to get that experience with no jobs that are hiring in that space? Like it's just,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, you can get those jobs by being humble and be willing to do the crappy jobs and just be willing to do an entry level job to get your foot in the door of a
Hmm.
company
Hmm.
in that space. But people aren't willing to do that. They're not
Hmm.
willing to humble themselves. They're not willing to work their way up. People are graduating with college with this sense of entitlement that the world owes them something just because they have a piece of paper with their name printed on it and they spent a bunch of money that they can't afford to pay back anytime soon, yet they're entitled to a good paying job,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, it's almost like people come out of school expecting to be paid six figures. Like that's like the
Oh, it's
norm.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yep.
So, but I mean, I could see how having, not having someone give you this advice like, "Hey, JP, have you ever considered the military?" And instead, people are like, "Hey, you have to go get a college education." But as you were considering this, you could still get your education when you go through the military, correct?
Yeah, you can take online classes. I mean, you get credits. You get college credits for a lot of the courses and schooling and stuff that you do in the military. I have friends that got multiple degrees while they
Mhm.
were in the military. I knew a master chief, which is an E9, which is the highest ranking individual in the military, on the enlisted side. He had three different master's degrees.
Wow.
So what's
Wow.
your excuse? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like if
yeah.
you're listening to this and you're saying, "Oh, I don't have time. I can't do this." This dude was a full-time Navy SEAL and got three master's degrees over his career.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane. Because he's working, you know?
Oh, yeah. That guy was working.
Mhm, mhm. So you get through high school, um, and I know that you were doing some work with your dad. He was in the construction business, and you were also working across the street from a recruiting office. And as you were sitting at your job, or as you were going to the office, and you would pass by this recruiting office, you would see this recruiting office every day, it's right across the street from you. Was it almost taunting you? Like, hey, JP, I'm over here. Remember that childhood dream you had? Remember
Yeah,
you always wanted to be a SEAL?
I would look at it, and I would, think back to the times we'd go and get posters as kids. But I honestly really never gave it even a second thought. And at the time, my parents had a cafe. So I was working at Steve's Pizza. My parents had a cafe downtown Sacramento. And then I was also working at uh, this guy washing cars that was right next to the pizza place, right? So I was washing and detailing cars. I was working at this pizza place. I was working at my parents' cafe when I had time. And then I was also, for a while in high school, teaching kickboxing at the gym that I, trained at and everything. So I was pretty busy. I was an athlete in school, and I did a lot of different stuff. And, I had gotten into a fight at a party. I was over at my friend's house, and these older guys, came over, and they were starting problems, and ended up getting into a fight. I broke my uh, knuckle in my hand. I broke the bones in my hand. I fractured the bone in my wrist. Next day I don't go to the doctors or anything, because me and my friends are supposed to go whitewater rafting. So I go rafting with them. It makes it even worse on my hand. Like I'm trying to just keep my hand in the river because it's ice, so it would be ice cold. I finally go home that next day, and my parents are like, "What the hell? Like, it's all swollen." They take me to the hospital. They reduce the swelling. I get a cast put on. And my parents were kind of frustrated with me, rightfully so. And my dad asked me, he's like, "What are you going to do after high school? Like, what do you want to do?" And at the time, I knew college wasn't for me. Um, and there's nothing wrong with a college education if you have a plan, and if you have a desire to go, and you have this path that you're going to be on. But I had none of that. I had no desire to go to school. I didn't have the money to, and I didn't want to waste. I didn't want to work full time to pay for something that I didn't want to do. It was just stupid to me. It's like a waste of money and time. And so, I told my dad, I was like, "Well, I think I'm gonna be a whitewater rafting guide, and just live on the river, man." My dad was not too thrilled about that answer, rightfully so. But I just didn't know what I wanted to do, and that's what my best friend was doing. So I figured, hey, man, that sounds like a good idea. And he kind of challenged me, and he said, "Well, what about the military? What about becoming a Navy SEAL? Both your grandfathers served in the military. They both served in World War II, and then one of them got out, and then my other grandfather continued to serve, and he served in the Korean War and Vietnam War, and retired from the military and went on to continue working for our country, doing some pretty cool stuff." And so I kind of sat and thought about all the things that they had told me, and these stories that I'd heard over the years, and what I thought I knew about the military. And you know, I just kind of was like, well, I don't know. I just remember, actually, to be honest, like what I thought was, when he said that, I was thinking like Navy. I, I'm thinking of these like Navy recruiters that come to your school. Then this is before war, right? So usually the Navy recruiters are just fat, sloppy, and they're just not motivated. Now, with, since things have changed overseas, like the recruiters tend to be pretty squared away
Mm-hmm.
for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
not all of them. And, I just remember thinking about those regular Fleet Navy guys that came to school, and I was like, man, and there's nothing wrong with the regular Fleet Navy. I'm not talking trash on the regular Navy at all. I have a lot of friends that are sailors that are serving in the military, doing awesome stuff in the Navy. But at the time, most of the Navy recruiters weren't stellar individuals. So that was kind of my mindset. I was like, I don't know. So anyways, go to work a day or two later, and I'm at the front desk, working the cash register because I can't do anything with food because I have a cast on.
Mm-hmm.
And I look across the street, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go check out the Navy recruiting office and just get some information. I'll appease my father, and that could be it. And so as I'm sitting there, I'm like thinking about everything I thought I kind of knew about the military. And I take my break, I go over there, I get some information, and I'm all fired up when I'm walking over there. And I walk in, and, these guys ask me what I'm doing there. And, I said, well, I would like to join the military. I'd like to become a Navy SEAL. I'd like some information on becoming a Navy SEAL. And they all started laughing. And I just remember how pissed off that made me. It was just the fact that these guys were laughing at me like I was just there BSing with them and I didn't have anything better to do. And I remember this older senior chief in the back corner. He says, there's two things, young man. One, the Navy won't touch you with that cast on your hand.
Mm-hmm.
We won't start the process. We can't do anything. And two, the Navy SEAL wannabe recruiter, he's going to be back in about 2 days. So if you want to come back on Thursday, have at it. And I just remember the whole wannabe portion of that, right? The whole
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, okay. So I was super polite and respectful. I got my information. I leave. I'm looking through it. I go back to work. And I made the decision that right then and there, I was going to join the military and become a Navy SEAL. Because I thought about all the things I thought I knew about the military, the stories that I've been told. And I've always liked the idea of service, whether it was law enforcement, firefighter, or military. I was always drawn to that. And so I make up the decision and I go home and I tell my dad, hey, you know what? I want to join the military, but the Navy won't do anything with this cast on my hand. And my dad's like, well, when do you want to leave? I said, I'd like to be able to go as soon as possible. And I think my dad kind of wanted me to start that process as well. Because he didn't want me to kind of like lose that momentum.
Yeah.
And my dad was like, okay, cool. Well, hey, go into the bathroom and start soaking your arm under some warm bath water. And I'm like, all right, cool. So I go in there, I turn on warm bath water, start soaking it. And my dad comes in there like 5 or 7 minutes later with some tools from the garage, and we cut my cast off. And I mean, it wasn't probably the smartest idea at the time medically for my hand. I only had my cast on for like 11 days, man.
And how long did they say that you were supposed to have it on?
Oh, that was like 8 weeks minimum, I
Right.
think.
Okay.
Because I broke the ring finger knuckle on my right hand. I fractured and broke the two bones in my hand of the pinky and the ring finger that goes back to the wrist, and fractured the wrist.
Yeah. So you were yeah.
Like I couldn't grip a pen or pencil when I got that cast cut off. But here's the deal, man. My parents always taught me you never allow somebody else to dictate what you're going to do with your life. If you want to go become a Navy SEAL, then just go become a Navy SEAL. Figure out what you need to do to accomplish it and make it work. You want to be a doctor? Go be a doctor. Guess what my sister has always wanted to do since she was a kid? She's wanted to be a doctor. And guess what my sister is right now? She's a freaking doctor. She finished med school to be a neurosurgeon, and she's finishing all the interviews to get on with the hospital. So it's, hey, if you want to go do something, do something. My brother wanted to join the military. Guess what? He joined the military after high school. My brother got into a career where with what he absolutely loves to do right now, and he has gone to the top because that's what we do. You don't allow or listen to people when they're telling you can't do that, you shouldn't do it. All that is BS. And most of the time, people that are telling you what you should and shouldn't do, and they're kind of trying to hold you back, have literally never accomplished anything else in their life. So when they see somebody else potentially going to go try to do something great with their life, they feel like they're protecting them. And they tell them, oh, you shouldn't do that. You should just do this. Take the safe road. Take the safe. No bullshit.
Have a plan
Nothing
B.
great is ever. Yeah. Nothing great is ever accomplished playing it safe. Nothing. And, I just remember like that was the way we were always raised. And so I cut my cast off. 2 days later, went into the recruiting office. And I remember walking into that recruiting office And that senior chief looking at me, and he just smiled and he nodded his head and he pointed over to the recruiter and he said, Petty Officer Garrett will take care of you. And from that point forward, it started my journey into the military, right? And that summer, I worked construction for my dad. And, my dad pushed me physically and mentally past my limits every single day. And, just for what he did for me, I'll forever be in debt to him because he prepared me to go into the military, to go to BUD/S, to try to become a Navy SEAL at a level above and beyond, right? And because my dad, he knew that most young kids don't make it through SEAL training. And that's a good thing. We don't want young, immature SEALs running around the world with millions of dollars worth a year in charge of people's lives. And that's what BUD/S is meant to do. It's meant to weed out the mentally weak, to weed out the immature, to weed out those who just, it's just not for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that is, that's just what we do in the military. And that's what we do in the SEAL teams. And my dad knew that. And so he did everything he could do to get me ready for that. And we, we're working construction and I couldn't grip a pen or pencil, man. So I couldn't grip a hammer properly. And,
Mm-hmm.
We had a bunch of remodeling to do. And, I was having to use a hammer for that portion of the work we were doing. And, we wrapped my hands real tight with my kickboxing hand wraps. I grabbed my hammer and he took a bunch of duct tape and wrapped it around there. And we taped that hand onto the hammer into a cast. And that's how I'd have to work all day long. And it was painful and it sucked, but you know what? That's what you do. You can make excuses or you can make things happen. You can't do both. And that was just another mindset that my parents gave us. It's like, hey, you have work to get done, get the work done. Okay. Hey, it might be a little painful. You might be a little bit slower than normal, but you don't allow things to hold you back. And so worked that summer. It helped strengthen my grip, helped with my mental push and capabilities, and just helping me kind of prepare to become a SEAL. And I remember I spent every extra moment I had with my friends trying to spend time with them. And, I went in the military on September 5th, 2001. And, I'm in boot camp and 6 days later, 9/11 happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember how that felt. And I just, it was crazy. There's a lot of fear and uncertainty in the room
Mm-hmm.
when one of our senior chiefs came in and he said, hey, our nation's been attacked. We might be going to war. And I wasn't afraid of going to war. There was no fear on my end of, what was going to happen overseas because I was in the military. I knew that they would train me. I knew that they would equip me. And I had been my whole, life mentally preparing for this, right? I always thought, hey, SEALs were always in war. So for me, that was no shock to me. Like I joined the SEAL teams because I wanted to go overseas and I wanted to fight terrorists and kill bad guys, right? That's all I've ever wanted to do.
Yeah, I was
But
gonna
what
say, like
was-
you were going in with that assumption, with that, like you knew
yeah,
when you signed up and when you signed the piece of paper, like there was that chance, there was that potential. But after 9/11 happened and they came in and said, like, hey, they didn't say we are gonna go to war. They still said like there's a chance that we could. But
yeah.
obviously there's some fear involved, but on your part, because you knew that this is what you were getting into, would you also say that there was some excitement almost?
Oh no, there was for sure some excitement. There wasn't fear. There was a lot of fear and uncertainty in my room with all the other guys in the Navy. My only fear is that somebody that I knew had been attacked because they didn't tell us what happened, right? Like I didn't know like if a bunch of bombs had been dropped in major cities or airports or if there was terror. I had no idea, no clue
Oh,
what had actually happened. So my
wow.
fear was, okay, what happened? Why are we going to war? We've been attacked. What does that mean? And then it wasn't until like a few hours later that we're like, all right, hey, these terrorists flew airplanes into the World Trade Center. This is everything that's going on. And my cousin was actually in New York at the time for culinary school, and I was just like really scared that something happened to him. But as far as like going overseas and having to go to war, man, I was fired up.
And so, obviously, like I said, you knew this, going in, but the other thing that I wanted to touch on from Buds was that you had a different mindset than some of the guys that were surrounding you because, as you said, normally, not even normally, nobody, I'm sorry, most people that go in, they don't make it through, right? It's a very select few, but
Yeah, the high attrition rate. When I
right.
started training, there was 222 guys in my class, and when we graduated, there was 28 of us from that original group.
Right. So there's a lot of people that are dropping out, but you had this mindset going through, and it was a mindset of like, I get to do this. It's not, I have to do this. But do you
Yes.
think that this was something that you were born with, or do you think it was something that you developed through all of these teachings from your dad prior to going to Buds?
Man, I don't know. Like I've wondered that. I've been asked that. I've talked about it. And I can't tell you if that's a trait that I was born with or if it was because of my parents, because I want to, I mean, I could have been born with it, but then also have gotten it from my parents because that was the mindset we always had. Like, hey, we're very fortunate, you know? And I just,
Mhm.
when I was going through that training, I just always reminded myself, hey, there's a lot of other guys that would love to have this opportunity. And I just told myself every single day, I get to do this. I get to go for a 4 mile time run. I get to go for an ocean swim. I get to do the obstacle course. I get to shoot guns and blow stuff up. I get to do it.
Mhm. Well, I think it was on another podcast that I was listening to that you were a guest on, but I believe it was when you were in San Diego and you were staying in the location where you had to stay. And, just down the street from you, there's these multi-million dollar homes, and people are paying just boatloads of money. And
Yeah, it's the
you're get to,
Coronado condos,
yeah.
and we were on the beach and we're getting beat down from our buds instructors, and they told us, hey, make sure you guys put on a good show. Those condos start for about $5 million a piece, and they're just telling us like, hey, you know, they're up there. These millionaires are up there watching you guys. Make sure you guys put on a good show. And I was like, geez. And it just, what clicked was just down the beach were the barracks that we lived in, that
Mhm.
we stayed in. And I had the same view that they had. I had everything that these people had, and I was getting paid to be there. I had oceanfront property. I had the same ocean. I had the same sand. I had the same sunset. I had everything that they paid millions of dollars for, yet I was getting paid to be there.
And it was just that positive mindset that
Mhm.
got you through this budge training. I mean, Hell Week, you're up for like 5 days straight, right? That's
Hell Week is 5.5 days straight,
and
with no sleep, all physical activities.
I mean, I can't even I can't even wrap my head around that, but this positive outlook, and it's that nature versus nurture. Like, were you born with it, or was it something that was always there? Or, is something that you got from your dad, or is it a mixture of both? Like, did you have it, but it was brought out because of the things that your dad had gone through and taught you?
Man, I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you get through your buds training. And as I said, when we were talking before, before our in the pre-show, it's going to be very difficult for us to narrow down your entire military career, and talk about some of the things that you did over the course of the number of years that you were enlisted. But
Yeah.
there were definitely some things, and so once you get out and you get that first call, and it's, hey, JP, it's time, like, we're going. What was it like for you?
So when I got on buds, I checked into SEAL Team 3, and we did our full workup, um, and which was preparing us to go overseas and do capture kill missions, right?
Hmm.
And those missions are pretty self-explanatory. We're going to either go capture bad guys or we're going to go kill them. And I was super fired up about this mission. The SEAL teams have been doing them for a while, and to be honest, I mean, it was awesome.
Hmm.
These guys were no match for us. And then right before we deploy, about 5 weeks, we find out that we're going to be taking over the personal security detail mission in Iraq, which is basically the babysitting of adults. We are going to be the security force to keep the top dignitaries of Iraq safe during the election time frame. Now, how excited do you think we were about that one?
Well, versus what you were supposed to be doing, like,
Yeah, we were pissed.
yeah.
Yeah, we weren't happy. Well, you're supposed to be going and doing capture kill missions. What do you mean we're doing personal security detail? And we had very little training. They sent us to a week and a half ish, maybe 2 weeks total of training to prepare us for this mission. And then we just went overseas and we just had to make it happen. And and we did, and while we had this mission, there were multiple kidnapping and assassination attempts, and not one major incident happened. We kept these guys safe, and we felt like we were doing some good stuff. Now we are wrapping up that deployment and headed home, and then we find out that things are getting really bad out west of Baghdad. So we were in Baghdad for that first deployment. We find out it's getting really bad in this little area called Ramadi. And at the time, Ramadi was the most deadly and dangerous neighborhood in the world. There's about 4,000 to 5,000 enemy fighters in that area. And there was actual areas in Ramadi that U.S. troops would not go into because it was so bad. And I remember thinking, man, I really hope we go there. And a lot of guys from my task unit and the SEAL teams were like that, because the majority of SEALs want to go do that. Now, there's a handful that are just doing it to do the job, that actually don't want to go get in combat, that actually avoid it. I know that sounds crazy, but there's a few out there. But the majority of us, man, we wanted to go get in that fight. And so we do our workup. We're getting ready to start our workup, and which is like a period of time of training that you do to prepare yourself for deployment. And that's when Jocko Willink came in to be our task unit commander. And I'd heard about Jocko, and I was like, man, this is going to be freaking awesome. This guy is the man. And he comes in and he's our task unit commander. And, the first thing he does is he kind of just resets the expectations of us. And he said, hey, guys, we're not going to make excuses. We're not going to blame anybody. We're going to take ownership of everything that affects our task unit: training, gear, everything. And there's a different mindset, because before, we kind of had this sense of entitlement that everything was there to support us, and that if we didn't have something or something wasn't right, we'd just bitch and complain and blame somebody else. And man, that's a wrong attitude to have. And he sat me down. He's like, JP, you're gonna have to make some difficult decisions overseas. You're going to be a young sniper, a young machine gunner, a young point man, but that means nothing to me. Your age and rank means nothing. I expect you to lead. I expect you to lead the members of your platoon, this task unit. I expect you to take ownership of everything that affects our mission. And you know what? You're going to make mistakes and you're going to fail, and that's okay. And when we had that conversation, it completely shifted my mindset, and it was empowering, and it made me want to, work hard for Jocko.
Mm-hmm.
And we're out in the middle of the desert doing this training, and he's like, hey man, when we get done with this block of training, I'm sorry, like for the day, right? Not the whole thing of training, but when we get done with tonight's training, when we get back to camp, I want you to put JP on your helmet, nice and big in black tape, so that I can always see you. I always want to know where you're at, because if I need something to happen, I'm going to come find you and you're going to make it happen. He goes, I need you to be my go-to guy. And that was so incredibly empowering. When Jocko did that for me, it empowered me to take what I was doing to the next level. It made me want to work so much harder for him. And it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible, because when he would task me to do something, or Seth, my platoon commander, would task me to do something, if I encountered some sort of a roadblock, I wasn't going back to Seth or my platoon chief or Jocko and saying, oh, I can't do this because of this, this, and this. No, I actually was finding ways to make it happen, to think outside the box, to accomplish a goal. And when I went to them, it was because it was the absolute last just reason as to why I couldn't get something done and I needed their help. And, I wasn't the only one that Jocko had as his guy, and I wasn't the only one that he gave ownership to. And it was our whole task unit. And that is the differentiating factor between our task units. It was us having ownership because he gave us ownership. If you want your team to take ownership, you have to give them ownership.
Mm-hmm.
You have to give them permission to fail. You have to push them to their limits and then a little bit farther, because people have these limitations that they hit because they put it upon themselves. But if we can really empower people to take these risks, to step up, just to get after it, it's night and day. It changes things. And, our task unit applied that mindset, and it helped us with that workup. And we went to Ramadi. We got picked to go to Ramadi. And I remember when I found out and they said, hey, we are headed to Ramadi. We're going there in a couple of weeks. We were fired up because we knew how bad it was. So when we got that call and we found out that we were going to Ramadi, I was ready. The media and our military was saying Ramadi was all but lost.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quote that was leaked to the press by an intelligence officer in the Marine Corps. And it said the social and political situation has deteriorated to a point that U.S. and Iraqi troops are no longer capable of militarily defeating the insurgency in Al-Anbar. So you think about that. Our military, our government, and our media was telling us that Ramadi was all but lost. It was an unwinnable situation. Our task unit didn't buy into it. We just didn't buy into it. And we deployed to Ramadi, and we linked up with this National Guard unit that had been there for 14 months. They've been in combat every single day, man. And I just remember seeing what these soldiers and Marines were going through every day. And it was just hey, man, this is real. What we thought was bad isn't even close to how bad it really is. And we knew we had to be dialed in. We had to be disciplined, and we had to be aggressive. We had to take the fight to the enemy. And if we didn't do that, things could get real bad for us.
And so when you guys were doing that and you have this team together, Jocko had multiple guys that he gave ownership to, and he really established a leadership team inside of this full SEAL team. And
Yes.
so he gave you the leadership, and we know what that did for you. It made you want to work even harder for him, and it made you want to take everything that you did just up to the next level, take it to the highest level that you could even take it to. But what did that also do for the team morale? What did it do for the team as a whole to know that there were 4 other guys or 5 other guys? I don't know how many there were, but what did it do for all of the leaders to know that there were other guys in the position that they were in to lead this group as a whole?
Guys were fired up. Guys were excited. Guys wanted to work hard and to perform, and we did.
And so that's your first experience, working with Jocko as your leader.
Yes.
It's not going to be your last, which we'll get into in a minute. But I like I said, I don't want to discount any of the things that you guys accomplished, but I do also want to be respectful of your time. So
Oh, you're fine, brother.
I do want to kind of fast forward through, through your military a little bit. Now, you guys did go and into this Battle of Ramadi. As best as you can, could you give us like the short version, of what happened in Ramadi and ultimately how you guys got out of there?
Yeah, so we show up to Ramadi. It was the most deadly and dangerous neighborhood in the world. They're telling us that it was unwinnable. There's 4 to 5,000 enemy fighters in the area, and the leadership that we were replacing told us, hey, if you go in there, you're going to get everybody killed. And our leadership said, well, that's okay. It doesn't seem possible because they knew our training, they knew what we were capable of, but they also knew that we had to actually be out there fighting the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
What do you accomplish from the sidelines? Absolutely nothing. You want to make a difference, get up and get it in the fight. And that's what we knew we had to do. So we started fighting. We started working. We started doing everything we could to support the soldiers and Marines in Ramadi. And when we did that, we started to build relationships. And when we built those relationships, things really started to change and we started to deliver massive impact. And we went from 30 to 50 enemy attacks a day to not one shot being fired when we left 6 months later. And that was incredible. I mean, the amount of missions that we went on, the amount of bad guys that we killed was just ridiculous. But more importantly than that was the amount of relationships we developed with the citizens of Ramadi, with the Iraqi soldiers that finally decided to take ownership. It was incredible. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. And we saw that area change. And, a year after we left, there was a 5K fun run that the citizens of Ramadi organized to run down Route Michigan. When we were there, Route Michigan was the most deadly and dangerous road in the world. It went right down the middle of Ramadi. It's connected the west to the east. And there was 7 to 10 IED attacks or roadside bombs attacks each day and multiple ambushes. It was crazy. It was such a dangerous road.
And there's
And
one.
to see that, see that difference.
I was just going to say, there's one thing before you talk about difference. There's one thing that you said that I really want to emphasize for people that I think is a testament to you. It's a testament to Jocko. It's a testament to the team that was there. But you guys got it to the point that you're about to tell us about in 6 months. And the team that was there before you, they were there for 14 months. And it was still as bad, if not getting worse, prior to you guys getting there. And I think that that's a testament to your team and to what you guys did there. And I wanted to emphasize that and acknowledge that because that's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So it wasn't we as in task unit bruiser, but it's what we did, soldiers, sailors, and Marines working together.
Mm-hmm.
Because that other unit that was there, they didn't have the proper leadership. They didn't have the proper training. They were just there to fight and do their job. And when they were replaced 2 months later, a month later, the 1-1 AD came in. And they're an armored division. They had tanks. And they came in, they had this new strategy. And it was very simple. We were going to seize, clear, hold, and build. Basically, we were going to secure Ramadi one neighborhood at a time. And when we started doing that, taking these little bites and then establishing our foothold and securing that ground and building these combat outposts, which is a fortified living and fighting position, that's when things really started to change. And within 6 months, we went from 30 to 50 enemy attacks each day to the last combat outpost we set up, not one shot was fired. Now, there was still attacks going on. Ramadi was still deadly, and it was bad. But it wasn't like when we first got there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We had made a difference. And then we left. And, you got pictures of the first all-girls school being built and established in Ramadi. And that was incredible to see that because the terrorist version of Islam does not support women's education. They had no schools for women and children. They didn't like them to be educated. And when you saw little girls being able to go to school. It was absolutely incredible. And then you get pictures of Marines playing with kids out on the street and giving them soccer balls. We're like, what? This is crazy. We never saw kids out. There was no kids out in the streets ever because it was so deadly and dangerous. And I just remember seeing that massive impact. And, victory had been won, but man, that victory came with a cost.
Mm-hmm.
We lost 9 Abram battle tanks, which is a huge 70-ton tank, 15 Bradley fighting vehicles, 34 Humvees, and almost 500 soldiers, sailors, and Marines were wounded in the Battle of Ramadi. While we were there, 61 were killed in action. The whole time the 180 was there, 98 were killed in action.
Wow.
But in our 6 months of those 15, 61 had been killed. And it was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And we're a small unit. We're a small group of people. And it was devastating because those soldiers and Marines became our brothers.
Mm-hmm.
We worked with them. We fought alongside them every single day. And the hits, the task unit bruiser were heavy. We lost Mark Lee. He was a first Navy SEAL killed in Iraq. He was killed on August 2nd, 2006. September 29th, Mikey Mansour was killed. He jumped on a grenade to protect the 2 guys next to him. He was posthumously awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. The same day that Mark Lee was killed, Ryan Jobe was wounded. He was gravely wounded by being shot in the face. He was pulled out of country for surgery and rehab, sent to Germany, got back to the United States. His high school sweetheart quits nursing school to take care of him. And, he's just trying to live a somewhat normal life. Mm-hmm. And surgery after surgery after surgery, he's completely blind, no sense of smell, no sense of taste, but he's not letting that hold him back. And, he summits Mount Rainier. He goes to business school and gets his degree with a 4.0 GPA. And, he's just living his life. And on the week that him and his wife find out that they're going to be having a baby girl, he goes in for surgery and dies due to complications. And that was rough.
Yeah.
Coming back from that deployment was really rough. But we knew the lessons that we learned had to be shared. They had to be delivered to the guys that were going to be going back overseas. And the lessons that we learned were humility, ownership, and teamwork. You have to have humility. You have to check your ego. The battlefield is extremely humbling. You have to take ownership of everything that you do. Because if you don't take ownership, things fall apart. When you cast blame and you point fingers, nothing gets done. And without teamwork, nothing is accomplished. There was not one mission that we did that we didn't have support. And even as a sniper, I never went out without support of somebody else. Whether it was back at base, back in a different overwatch, back in a mutually supporting position, everything we did was with somebody else. And people have to learn to get on the same page, and that it doesn't matter who gets the credit as long as you're accomplishing that goal, as long as you're winning and accomplishing your mission. And leadership is the most important thing on and off the battlefield. And it doesn't mean leadership as in Jocko Willink, our task unit commander, or the brigade commander, or the CEO of your company. I'm talking about individual leadership at every single level. That's what matters. And so we came back from that deployment. We had all these lessons learned, and Jocko took over the training command, and we went to work. He pulled me over there. I was supposed to redeploy. I had some medical issues. I had surgery. I ended up with some nerve damage. So I went over to training, and we brought back those lessons that we learned. And that's when Jocko came up with the 4 laws of combat. That's what Jocko and Leif write about in the book, Extreme Ownership. Mm-hmm. If you want more information on the Battle of Ramadi, if you want more information on the laws of combat, the mindsets of victory of what we learned in Ramadi and how it can be applied to your personal and professional lives, read the book. And then get the Dichotomy of Leadership. That's the second book that they wrote. The laws of combat is very simple. The first one is cover and move. That means teamwork. The second one is simple. You have to be able to simplify your communication. If your team doesn't understand what you're trying to ask them to do, or if you are trying to communicate with another individual and they don't understand what you're trying to put out there, or you're putting out too much information, you're going to fail. The third one is prioritize and execute. It's about looking at what you have in front of you. What can you get done right now? What needs to be done first? What can you put off? And what can you delegate? What can you have somebody else work on? And then last is decentralized command. That simply means you empower your team to lead with not just telling them what to do, but why. You give them the why behind the what so that they can make decisions. You give them ownership. And that's what we were training with. That's what we were trying to revamp. And it was cool to see all this go down and to see the training change and to be a part of that. And yeah, I wanted to be overseas, but you know what? It wasn't my time to be over there at that point. I needed to be at the training command. And I spent the rest of my time in the military at the training command. I deployed once more overseas with another unit. But I got out from my family. I met my wife. We decided that we were going to get married and have kids. And she decided that moving from a small town in Mississippi to San Diego was going to be too much. I got out and I moved to Mississippi, and, I got a job doing sales at a financial company, and I wasn't too thrilled about that, but hey, it was a way to make money for my family, and that's what mattered. And, I really struggled with my transition out of the military because I failed to reestablish my mission. And that's the big thing that people are going to fail with is you don't have to be in the military. You don't have to be doing law enforcement or anything like that. No matter what you're doing, you have to make sure you understand what your mission in life is. What are you currently working towards? What are you fighting for? What matters to you? Because you haven't established that, everything falls apart. And you'll just be coasting through life, and everything will be average or below average, and you're going to be miserable. And even though I was making really good money, I was miserable. I hated my life. I wasn't happy. So you have to know what your mission is. You have to take the time to establish that, come up with a game plan, and just get to work. Mm-hmm. And so I was with that company. Amanda and I actually got divorced because we were so unhappy. We both were just in a really bad spot. And, we ended up getting back together because, I read the book Extreme Ownership. Mm-hmm. I realized, hey, you know what? I actually have the ability to change and fix everything that's going wrong in my life. And when I decided to take ownership of my marriage, of my family, I was actually able to get it all back. And that was crazy. It was awesome. And so I started my own consulting company. I left that financial company. I was doing team building events for companies. I was teaching shooting, and I started a company called Never Settle Consulting. And then that kind of turned into an apparel company. I was selling shirts and hats, and I was doing what I could to make money for my family. I was an extra in Transformers 5, and it was pretty cool. I was an extra playing a Navy SEAL, so that was pretty rad.
So it wasn't even playing, right? That's like that's just real life for you. Yeah.
You kidding me? I used to go, and you're gonna pay me to do it? Cool, man.
Yeah. And so as you're working your way through doing all this, aside from after you and Amanda split up and then got back together, aside from the time before, once you had gotten back together, you had taken ownership. I'm sure that no matter what you were doing, Amanda was very, very supportive in everything that you were doing. And, you're trying to do what you can here and there, and you have this opportunity to go over and make some very good money. And for the course of 70 days, you're going to go and do these trainings, and you're going to be paid like $1,000 a day for these 70 days while you're over there.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go overseas and do some contracting work / training, and it was $1,000 a day for 70 days. And at the time we didn't have a lot of money, and it was just, I was stoked. I was super fired up to go do that job, man. Mm-hmm. And then at the time, that's when I had the opportunity come about from Jocko of saying, hey, you should come out to San Diego. We have an event that we're doing called the Muster. It's the first time we're doing something like this. Not really sure how it's going to turn out, but hey, the company's growing and we might need to bring on another instructor because I was consistently reaching out to Jocko and Leif and saying, mostly Jocko and just actually all of Jocko. Now I think of it and just saying, hey, is there anything I can do to help? Is there
Mm-hmm.
anything I can do to help out, man? And I know the mentor doesn't seek out the mentee, so I'm reaching out to you. And he's always like, hey, make sure you're reading the book and listen to the podcast, and if it comes about a time that you can help, I'll let you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the time came, and I had to make a decision. It was either go to San Diego to see what they were doing and talk about maybe being a part of the team, or this guaranteed gig overseas. And my wife was like, you know the answer. Jocko and Leif will always take care of you. They're not as in like they're gonna just give you stuff, but they're not gonna screw me over,
Mm-hmm.
right?
They're not
She's
going
like,
to point you in the wrong direction either. Like
yeah.
you
And then
knew what Jocko was like as a
it's
leader and how he was going to build things just based off of
100.
yeah.
Yeah. And and so took that risk and decided to head out there, and man, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Now,
And
so I was going to say, you made it seem like it was a relatively easy decision because you knew Jocko, you knew what you were getting yourself into. Again, the same way that you did with the military. Like we talked about it, when you were getting into the military, you knew what you were getting yourself into. You knew that you could potentially be going to war. When Jocko came over, you knew what he was like as a leader. You had already heard his name, like you knew what you were getting into when he was coming on board. Now, when you have this opportunity, you also know what you're getting into, even though there's still
oh yeah.
some things that are unknown. Like, did you sit down and really weigh out pros and cons and like really think about this decision, or was it the way that you're saying it? Like, it was an easy decision, and you're like, nope, I'm going with Jocko.
It was an easy, hard decision because Jocko even said, he's like, hey man, like I don't know what there could be one gig, there could be 52 gigs, like nobody knows who you are, nobody's requesting JP, but I'll tell you what, like this is what we're doing and we're growing. And I just knew, man, like I just trusted Jocko. I knew what he was capable of. I knew what Leif was capable of. And I knew that I didn't want to sit back, because I remember the one thing he said, he's like, yeah, hey, maybe we'll be able to do this again in the future. And I was like, man, I am not missing out on this opportunity. And so I went all in. I went all in with them, and it's been an incredible 3 years. I've been with them for 3 years. I've spoke all across the world. I've spoken internationally multiple times. I've spoken all across the United States. And it's been amazing. I've been able to grow from just leadership instructor doing keynotes to half day and full day workshops and multiple day assessments, and part of our leadership development alignment programs that we run with companies, where we really partner up with the company. And I'm the director of experiential training, meaning I am in charge of all of our hands-on scenario-based leadership training. And it's awesome, man. It is where we take the principles that we teach in the classroom and we bring it out to the field to make it practical, to impose stress on these different leaders in different scenarios as they're out there running capture kill missions against my role players. And all these missions that you conduct have the leadership principles ingrained into them. And everyone is going to dictate the laws of combat, the mindsets of victory. And then when we come back from those missions that we're running constantly throughout the day, we're rotating the leadership. The most important thing that we do is we tie it into your business and what you do every day, so that you can take those lessons and bring it back to your team, and you can change the culture of your company.
And when you were given not only just the initial role to come out to San Diego to start working with Jocko, but as he started to give you more and more responsibility, did you have that same feeling that you had back when Jocko first came on board to your SEAL team and said, JP, like you're going to be my go-to guy?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's nothing I wouldn't do for Jocko and Leif. I know they'll always have my back, and they're always pushing me to go to the next level. And I don't want to fail those guys. I just I'll never fail those guys. I just always, am reminding myself of how fortunate I am to be in the position that I'm in. And that's the thing that I think people are missing is they don't understand truly how good they have it. And if you looked at the opportunity that you had, you'd be more grateful to go out there and work harder. And if you truly don't like the environment that you're in, change it. Either change the people or change the people, meaning change those that are around you by being a better influence, by working with them, by talking with them, or change the people by leaving. Like go join another team, another company that is going to allow you to grow, that's going to allow you to take what you do to the next level. Because if you're not willing to do that on your own, stop complaining. It is solely up to you. You 100% have the ability to control your emotions, to control your environment so that you can have a better situation. Stop blaming other people and take action and take ownership of your life.
So normally at the end of every show, I typically like to ask the guest what they would say to someone who is still sitting on the couch, but I think you just nailed it. So
There we go, brother.
I just want to take a minute, first of all, to say, number one, thank you very much for your service in the military. Number two,
Thank you.
thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your story of how you're doing it for yourself, how you went through the military, and everything that we got into. I really appreciate you setting aside time, especially in the evening, to come on the podcast. I don't want it to go unnoticed that how much I do truly appreciate you, taking the time to sit down with me. And the last thing is, please let everyone know where they can connect with you, where they can keep up with you and what you're up to. Because I know on Instagram, that's where I found you many years ago. And that's something that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. So on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, it is all the same. It's at JP Dinnell. So that's JP as in Patrick, D as in David, Innell. On LinkedIn, I believe is Jeremiah Dinnell. I don't really ever get on LinkedIn. It seems like that's just more of a, hey, I'm going to spam you with all my shit area these days. But
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong. Hey, glad to connect with you. Have you thought about taking your business to the next level? I can provide you leads. Get out of here.
Yeah.
So I don't spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Most of my stuff is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, check out Extreme Ownership. Check out that book, Dichotomy of Leadership. Get those books. Jocko has a brand new book that just came out. It is ridiculous. It's Leadership, Strategy, and Tactics by Jocko Willink. He also has the Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. All those books are amazing. And then, follow us at Echelon Front on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. So that's ECHELONFRONT.com. And echelonfront.com is our website. So if you want to inquire about maybe having me come and speak at your event or with your company or with your team, send me a message on Instagram or just hit us up on the website and request some more information. But man, I really appreciate you having me on your podcast. I hope you gained some value from our time, and I hope your listeners find some value. And hey, if you guys find value, subscribe to this podcast and share it. Share the podcast with people, and go take ownership of something that you've been lacking on and see the difference that it'll make in the next 30 days.
Cool. I appreciate all that so much, JP. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
All right. So that is it. That is my interview with JP Dinnell. And I hope that you really enjoyed this interview. This was an interview that I was really looking forward to, and it was one that I was very, very excited about. I have listened to many podcasts that JP has been on. I'm a big fan of his. I'm a big fan of his story, and I'm a big fan of what he is doing with Echelon Front. So I hope that you enjoyed this interview. If you did enjoy this interview, share it with a friend and let them know why you think that they would enjoy this interview. As always, if you could take a few minutes to leave a review on the app that you are currently using to listen to this podcast, I would greatly appreciate that. It is going to help us grow the show. It's going to help us reach more people to bring into our community here, and it's something that I enjoy reading as well. So that is it. That's all I have for you this week, and I look forward to having you back on the next episode.